Recuerde que el verdadero poder del amor no es suficiente que el amor por el poder. Muchas gracias.
Después de esta comida, la asesinaron en un restaurante ubicado en Quevedo, provincia de Los Ríos.
April 29, 2024, Landy Baraga, a former Ecuadorian beauty queen, was gunned down while having lunch with her boyfriend. Little did anyone know her death would expose her cartel involvement and the shocking secrets behind her glamorous life. This is what happens when female narcos mess with brutal cartels. 2014, the Los Zetas cartel captured the deadliest female sicario, Yesenia Pacheco, aka La Güera Loca, meaning the crazy witch. Now, they'd hunted her for 5 years, and now it was time for her to pay the price for all she did against the Zetas. As far as the Mexican drug cartel world was concerned, La Güera Loca was a name that terrified even the most hardened cartel sicarios. She wasn't only feared, but she was also deeply disliked by rival cartel members, who were angry at her for many reasons over the years. Yesenia really terrorized them, and they couldn't bring her to justice. In fact, her methods of assassinating rival cartels were crazy, thus her nickname. In 2009, Yesenia joined the Gulf Cartel. It was almost a natural decision for her to join, because she was born in Navalato, Sinaloa, where the Gulf Cartel was highly respected. She wanted respect, she wanted money, and being a member of one of Mexico's most violent cartels promised her everything she desired. But new members must start from the bottom and prove themselves. So Yesenia was made a hawk. In the cartel world, hawks are like spies. They stand as lookouts for other cartels, police, or military movement. They would heavily spy on their enemies, and being a girl makes the job that much easier, as women are less likely to be suspected. Yesenia wasted no time in showing her bosses that she was capable of anything demanded from her, things even the most experienced sicarios would consider extreme. And because of her unique skills and lack of emotion, she quickly rose through the ranks, earning a reputation in the organization. In 2010, the Gulf Cartel suddenly entrusted Yesenia with her own faction, and she became the first woman to ever receive such an honor of leading her own elite group of assassins called Las Enas. This was a role she would embrace with passion. Her mission was clear and brutal: to annihilate Los Zetas, which was the main rival of the Gulf Cartel at the time. Yesenia was permitted to be as extreme as she wanted to be, and that was exactly what she did. Between 2011 and 2013, she had a reign of terror. Acts like beheadings, skinning rivals alive, and dismembering her captives were all too common. This chick was brutal, and no one knows for sure how many people she killed. It's scary to kind of think about it, but some people say she killed a lot, maybe even in the hundreds. She and her friends were always trying to show how powerful they were and how they didn't care about anyone else. And as if it was no big deal, they killed people quickly, without any feelings. In 2011, the internet witnessed a shocking spectacle in a video where Yesenia stepped into the spotlight. With a twisted grin on her lips, she grabbed a machete and began the disturbing task of cutting off the head of a Los Zetas cartel member. It would last about 2 minutes, but the gruesome nature of this video made it really hard to watch. In the video, she would hack away, showing no mercy or remorse. But the horror had only just begun. As the head rolled away, another cartel member stepped forward with a box cutter in hand. He then proceeded to skin the victim's face with precision, like a butcher preparing a side of beef. For a grueling 10 minutes, he flayed the flesh, while the group cheered and laughed on camera. But still, the worst was yet to come. The camera then moved to another group that had their hands dripping with blood as they hacked and sawed at the body, reducing it to a pile of flesh and bone. This was the video that made Yesenia, the blonde psycho, become popular in Mexico. However, her reign of terror eventually came to an end. By 2014, her fate was sealed, and she would pay for all her evil works. Yesenia had evaded capture for 5 long years from a rival cartel. In those years, the Zetas really tried to get her, but Yesenia was pretty sleek. Now, they could have easily just gunned her down, but they didn't want to just kill her. They wanted to do other things. They wanted to make a spectacle of the blonde psycho who was responsible for the death of many of their members. On the day she was captured, Yesenia was ambushed by 3 of her killer squads. There was no escape this time, and she knew her fate was sealed, so she didn't put up a fight. While they wasted no time in beheading her 3 companions, the Zeta sicarios took their time to make sure that Yesenia suffered. She was tortured and humiliated by everyone while they recorded it all on camera. When they were done messing with her, the real horror began. One of the men skillfully slit her throat in such a way that she was choking on her blood all while still being alive. Then they allowed her to suffer this way before her head was cut off with a machete. The Zetas made sure she was paid back in the exact fashion she executed those who were unfortunate to be her victims. Her remains were then found some days later, butchered and stuffed in a briefcase, which was then dumped on a landfill. The Zetas cartel disposed of her intentionally like trash, as a clear message of what they think of her. As brutal as the death of Yesenia was, it's nothing compared to what was done to this next female narco.
Recuerde que el verdadero poder del amor no es suficiente que el amor por el poder. Muchas gracias.
Después de esta comida, la asesinaron en un restaurante ubicado en Quevedo, provincia de Los Ríos.
2022, Landy Baraga contested for Miss Ecuador and quickly became famous. But what made her even more famous was her involvement with one of the most powerful cartels in Ecuador, which ended her life through an unexpected string of events. Baraga took full advantage of her appearance in the 2022 Miss Ecuador pageant to gain popularity. After she represented Los Rios province in the contest, she became very active on social media, where she shared her vibrant life with her fans. Her life, at least on the surface, seemed almost magical. Her Instagram was full of elegant images, showcasing her luxurious lifestyle, stunning outfits, and trips to beautiful places. With over 1 million followers, Landy was living the kind of life many dreamt about. But beneath that glamour, there was a side hidden from her fans, a side that would eventually have devastating consequences. The life Landy lived was the life only a millionaire could afford. It was strange that she could somehow afford that lifestyle in a poor country like Ecuador without showing any kind of verifiable source of income to justify that level of wealth. Her secret would not stay hidden for long though. The first thing that came to light was when her name surfaced in connection with Leandro Norero, a notorious Ecuadorian drug lord, popularly known as El Patron. Everyone in Ecuador associated his name with power and fear in the country's underworld. This guy was known for his involvement in the drug trade and other criminal operations, really being one of the most powerful figures in Ecuador's expanding cartel. But his influence wouldn't just be to the criminal world and throughout different circles of society, because he had a lot of money. Even though he had a lot of friends in government, he was still a target that was being closely watched by the authorities, and he would eventually become a target of a massive criminal investigation named Metastasis. This investigation aimed to dismantle his network, implicating more than 50 individuals, including government officials and lawyers. And shockingly, Landy was among those entangled in this web. As a part of the Metastasis investigation, police obtained Norero's phone, and in it, they found a series of messages and conversations that revealed his connection to Landy. At first, it seemed unimaginable that a beauty queen with a life so public would be linked to someone like Norero. But this was evidence that proved that she didn't only date this guy, she knew exactly what he was involved in. Norero had confided in his lawyer, expressing concerns over the discovery of his affair with Landy. We know this thanks to records released by Ecuador's Attorney General's office. He feared his wife might find out, knowing such a revelation could cause his world to crumble. But this was no ordinary relationship. Their connection hinted at something deeper, potentially involving illegal activities like money laundering, raising troubling questions about how far Landy might have been involved. Lina Romero isn't someone you would dare cross. As the wife of Leandro Norero, she didn't merely stand beside him as a passive spouse. Instead, she matched his power and reputation as a dangerous narco boss. Romero's alleged role is anything but subtle. She's been accused of bribing judges and prosecutors, suggesting she tried to influence the very legal system meant to keep people like her in check. This wasn't the only charge against her. Investigations would also show she money laundered for Norero, fueling their network, ensuring their illegal profits stayed clean and accessible, even as authorities would close in. But bribery and money laundering was just the start. Norero was scared of what Lina would do if she found out about Landy, but Landy didn't seem to care. Her focus was just on enjoying the privileges of dating a cartel boss as rich and as powerful as Norero. May 25, 2022. In a series of 19 coordinated raids, police stormed multiple locations across the provinces of Manabi, Guayas, and Santa Elena, seizing more than $6 million in cash, along with gold bars, jewelry, and firearms. Narrero was arrested during that raid, and his ties with groups such as Los Lobos, Los Tiguerones, Los Lagartos, and Chone Killers meant that he'd be facing serious jail time. These gangs, notorious for their ruthlessness, are said to work in partnership with the Mexican Jalisco New Generation Cartel. This network allowed Narrero's influence to spill over Ecuador's borders, deepening his reach into the larger international drug trade. Once in custody, though, Narrero was transferred to the Latacunga prison, known for housing high-risk inmates. However, his arrest wouldn't mark the end of his story. Ecuador's prison system, notorious for gang-related violence and riots, became the setting for Narrero's final chapter. So, just 5 months after he was arrested, he was murdered inside the walls of Latacunga prison, and this meant Lina was now fully in charge of his organization. And it also meant that his mistress, Landy, now had no one to protect her. April 29, 2024, the tension around this secret relationship reached a tragic climax. That day, Landy and her new boyfriend were having lunch in a restaurant in Quevedo, a bustling city in Ecuador.
Después de esta comida, la asesinaron en un restaurante ubicado en Quevedo, provincia de Los Ríos.
Security camera footage later revealed what happened. In the middle of their meal, 2 masked gunmen entered the restaurant, scanning the room. The footage shows Landy, seemingly aware of the men, turning slightly as one of them walked up to her and began firing. The sudden burst of gunfire struck both Landy and her new boyfriend, leaving them fatally wounded. The horror of the murder left many asking how her killers knew where to find her.
Averiguar a qué sabían los policías de Landy.
Just before the attack, she had posted a photo on Instagram showing her meal, a plate of octopus ceviche. Investigators suspected that the post may have revealed her location, giving the gunman the precise lead to where she was. And what seemed like a harmless update to her followers could have been all her enemies needed to track her down. But now, who would have wanted Landy dead, and why? Theories quickly surfaced, many which pointed to Narrero's widow as a potential mastermind behind the murder, but it is believed she may have discovered the affair and had sought revenge, enacting a bitter and deadly response to her husband's betrayal. Now that theory aligns with what Narrero himself feared. He had once told his lawyer that he dreaded his wife finding out about Landy, knowing it would lead to disaster. I mean, that's just what happens to women who mess with cartel bosses who have powerful wives. So Landy's case isn't really rare, but it did gain attention because of her popularity. If you think that's disturbing, wait till you see how this next person messed with a deadly cartel. Welcome to April 12, 2015. Hitmen of the Los Metros cartel captured Jocelyn Alejandra Niño, infamously known as La Flaca, or the Skinny One. Now, interestingly, her story is one of a hunter becoming the hunted, but in the most extreme way imaginable. Jocelyn Niño entered into the narco world as an assassin tied to the notorious Gulf Cartel, which is a powerful criminal organization deeply involved in the violent-riddled state of Tamaulipas, Mexico. Her alias pointed not only to her slender physique, but also would hold a darker significance, as an homage to Our Lady of Holy Death, a female skeleton saint feared yet loved by many Mexicans, especially within the shadowy world of the drug trade. In fact, only the most dreaded female sicarios were recognized by the name of La Flaca, and Jocelyn earned that recognition by being ruthless. La Flaca's journey into the cartel underworld was no accident. Like many women brought into organized crime, she was recruited for her looks, which allowed her to blend in seamlessly and avoid suspicion from enemies and authorities alike. Now, this skill proved essential in a world where being invisible could mean survival. It also meant she could execute her targets more easily, as many men wouldn't consider such a pretty lady to be a cold-blooded killer. But her career within the Gulf Cartel wasn't simply about evading detection. La Flaca was a soldier in every sense. She was part of a fierce subgroup called Los Ciclones, and her role was to battle opposing factions like Los Metros, a rival group fighting for control in the cartel's endless turf wars. On January 5, 2015, a photo of Jocelyn surfaced online, showing a young woman with a childlike smile. yet chillingly armed and wearing a bulletproof vest. This was the image that cemented La Flaca's popularity. The pic, leaked on Valor por Tamaulipas, quickly circulated across social media and gained her a lot of admirers. It also made her a prime target for both the government and rival gangs. Authorities suspected the picture was uploaded by Los Metros, with the aim of exposing Jocelyn and turning her into a marked target. April 12, 2015, Los Metros captures Jocelyn and two of her allies. By the next day, the authorities found her dismembered body in a discarded ice cooler in Rio Bravo. Her limbs had been severed, along with two other corpses lying beside her. A tattoo bearing her last name, Niño, was the only way authorities could identify her remains. And if her killers wanted to add to that fear, they succeeded with the release of graphic photos online. That was a brutal message aimed at her faction, Los Ciclones. And as far as her killers were concerned, Jocelyn was a cold sicario, and she died suffering the same fate she served others. While the death of Jocelyn is unarguably horrific, the punishment given to a seemingly harmless young woman will leave you speechless. March 2024, Gabriela Lima Santana disappeared without a trace. Little did anyone know that she had met a terrible fate that proved just how dangerous it was to get involved with cartels. On March 13, 2024, Gabriela was supposed to be preparing for her birthday, which was coming up on the next day of that month. While everything kind of looked normal, her family had no idea how much trouble she was really in. You see, for some days no one had seen or heard from her, but they assumed that she was fine and was probably with her friends. They were also very sure that she wouldn't miss her birthday, so they hoped she would show up at least a day before the birthday. However, when evening started approaching on that day, everyone wondered where she was. And it would be at this point that they report the situation to the police. In Rio Grande do Sul, Brazil, where this incident happened, disappearances weren't rare. They're almost expected. This region was a breeding ground for gang warfare, with police raids happening regularly. Both gangs and cops had notorious reputations, each accused of leaving behind a trail of missing or dead people. One gang in particular, feared in this region, is Bala na Cara, meaning bullet in the face. The message is pretty straightforward. Cross their path and you get a bullet in the face. Yet for those who truly angered them, the punishment went far beyond a mere gunshot. Gabriela Santana was destined to suffer a fate far worse. Just days after Gabriela vanished, a gruesome video began making the rounds. In it, a man stood over a woman's dismembered body in a bathtub, slicing and smiling for the camera. The woman was soon identified as Gabriela. Her killer chopped her body, stuffing the remains into a suitcase before discarding it in a ditch in Capao da Canoa. The man in the video, later identified as a 49-year-old gang member, appeared disturbingly satisfied with his horrific task. He was joined by a 23-year-old accomplice. Their faces were soon revealed to the public, but the police withheld their names. March 24, 2024, several days after Gabriela went missing, municipal workers clearing garbage from a drainage ditch stumbled upon a gruesome sight. A worker sifting through the debris suddenly froze. There, drifting in the water, was a human arm, and not far from it was a suitcase oozing with the smell of rotten flesh. When forensics pulled that heavy suitcase from the ditch and unzipped it, they found a shocking scene. Inside was Gabriela's body, dismembered and stuffed within. Her limbs and torso also stacked inside. But that's not all. Stones were in the suitcase to help it sink underwater. Additionally, scattered near the suitcase were saws, knives, and other sharpened instruments that were believed to have been used by her killers. In fact, the police were only able to confirm her identity through her fingerprints and tattoos, one of which suggested an allegiance to a local gang. While no one knows exactly what led to the murder of Gabriela, it is believed that she had been butchered in a suspected retaliation against a rival gang. If you think the cartel killing Gabriela a few days before her birthday was brutal, wait until you hear what was done to a cartel boss lady on her wedding day.
Comandante Azul, putos, arriba Santa Rosa de Lima.
January 2020, the wedding of a cartel boss lady named Karem Lisbeth Ortiz turned into a massacre after sicarios of the CJNG stormed the venue. While many thought it was just a terroristic attack on innocent people, it later became clear that it was brutal revenge. Carem Lisbeth Yepes Ortiz, also known as La Señora, was born into a family deeply involved in the criminal world of Guanajuato, Mexico. Now, her brother, Jose Antonio Yepes Ortiz, popularly known as El Maro, was the leader of the Cartel de Santa Rosa de Lima, or the CSRL.
Se convirtió en el sucesor de José Antonio Yepes Ortiz, El Marro, después de su captura el pasado 2 de agosto.
This organization, named after their hometown, quickly gained a bad reputation for its extensive operations in fuel theft, drug trafficking, extortion, and violent battles against rival groups. Initially, CSRL was under the leadership of David Rogel Figueroa, or El Guero, before Jose Antonio Yepes Ortiz assumed control. Once El Mato took the reins, the cartel rapidly grew, turning its attention primarily to the lucrative and highly illegal activity of stealing fuel from Pemex pipelines, a practice known to the locals as huachicoleo. The substantial profits from this operation allowed CSRL to expand its influence, tightening its grip on the region, and becoming one of the major cartel players in Mexico. With this expansion, it was only a matter of time before CSRL had problems with other powerful cartels. The main challenge would come from the Cartel Jalisco Nueva Generación, or CJNG, commanded by Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, alias El Mencho. Now guys, the CJNG is not a cartel you want to have business with, especially under the leadership of El Mencho, a man with no soul. But for some reason, Carem and her brother felt confident they could take on the CJNG and win. Wow. They soon learned how wrong they were. This intense rivalry started a wave of violence that gripped Guanajuato, transforming it into one of Mexico's most dangerous regions. The CSRL became notorious for its ruthless attacks, which included kidnappings, extortion, and targeted killings, pushing the region deeper into a crisis marked by bloodshed and fear. February 2019, Santa Rosa de Lima operatives launch a deadly attack on the CJNG. 2 pickup trucks of CSRL suddenly stopped on a deserted dirt road, and masked men opened fire on suspected CJNG associates. The attack was meant as a warning and reminder of El Mato's determination to protect his territory. However, the CJNG was no stranger to brutality, so just a few months later, the CJNG carried out a revenge attack. They released footage of a high-ranking Santa Rosa de Lima member, Adolfo Mendoza Valencia, who they had captured and bound shirtless to a chair. His execution was quick, and his lifeless body was left hanging from a highway overpass. But these were only warm-ups, as the battle between these 2 cartels would get even worse and cost Carem and her brother everything. January 2020. Carem was getting married to another member of her cartel. It all looked like a normal wedding. She would stand at the altar holding the hands of her soon-to-be husband, known in the cartel world as El Calamardo. But this wasn't just a ceremony. It was the forming of a strong alliance in a world where loyalty and survival are very important. However, unknown to the cartel boss lady, 3 vehicles stayed hidden outside the church. Each was filled with armed men wearing bulletproof vests marked with the unmistakable acronym of the CJNG. They were not guests, but agents of death, on the orders of Nemesio El Mencho Oseguera Cervantes himself. As the priest prepared to pronounce Carem and El Calamardo husband and wife, the silence was shattered with gunfire erupting from the back of the church. Carem barely had time to register what was happening as the gunman grabbed her husband from her side. Not long after, chaos erupted as repeated gunfire started, sending wedding guests scrambling for cover. Unfortunately, one bystander, an 18-year-old on his motorcycle, was caught in the crossfire outside and was hit. His friend and a passenger were also found nearby with their own bullet wounds. The gunman hit their target, with Carem shot and dead on the spot. Her death was a message sent directly to her brother, El Mato, whose whereabouts at that time remained a mystery. Some reports hinted that he was present but was disguised in the crowd. The CJNG gunman left the church with Carem's husband, El Calamardo, and another unknown man. However, the death of Carem was only the beginning of the fall of the CSRL cartel. August 2, 2020, Mexican authorities captured Jose Antonio Yepes Ortiz in a dramatic raid in Juventino Rosas, Guanajuato. This operation, involving federal and state forces, also resulted in the rescue of a kidnapped businesswoman who was being held for ransom. El Maro's arrest would mark the end of an era in Guanajuato, but it wouldn't be the end of cartel violence in this Mexican state.